So this is the first podcast recording,
hopefully of many.
Conversation, call it what you will, of many.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Between me, Tom Mann.
And me, Adam Etheridge.
And we're just going to shoot the shit, really. We don't know particularly what we want to talk about. Why don't you just tell me, Adam, why we're doing this?
Well, I think for quite a long time I've been the type of person who's sort of struggled to really find my own words and the voice that I truly want to communicate. And I think it's manifested in the kind of way that, people might say I do quite a lot of talking, but whether that actual communication is honest and just kind of authentic. And so I just felt like through kind of doing some therapy in the past and things like that, we've kind of just come to a point where I just thought about doing something that maybe would help me find a much more sort of authentic and sort of just honest way of being able to talk to people. And I think, talking to someone like yourself, a long-time friend, that kind of allows me to hopefully kind of maybe bore them at times a bit more than, that other people might be a bit willing to listen to me. But I'm just trying to see if I can then get something out there, listen to it, and use it as a way to kind of actually help myself just be a more authentic and truer kind of communicator to anyone around me, and feel happier about kind of the words that I'm saying, making it much more kind of just sort of happier with my own skin feeling about the way I talk to people. So is the kind of the concept of doing this. And, I'm just very appreciative that I've got someone who's like yourself, who, I can talk about anything to, and it's just another really good reason to kind of spend time with you. And, I think it's if it becomes something that we can find subjects or particular things to talk about, I'm just hoping we're just going to be more kind of free about this, especially, to begin with, and just find our way into maybe a groove. Maybe it becomes a theme type thing, but I'm hoping it's going to be just you and me, hopefully being able to kind of just have a chat. And, if it's interesting to the people, or people might find it, entertaining, then so be it, more than anything. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm really super excited about this. And you've mentioned this maybe a couple of months back, and I was just like, yes, this sounds so good. Because, we have known each other an awfully long time. And maybe for people listening, we should just tell a little bit about our history. So we knew each other before we were born, really, didn't we? Because our dads were friends. They went to school together. They went to boarding school in basically another part of the country that was a bit closer to where you're from, which is Wales, a bit further away from me, which is Sheffield. But over the course of many years, we've kind of grown up together, haven't we? Yeah. And you moved to Sheffield. We've got a lot of the same friends, the university and all this. And it's, we've both kind of experienced, therapy and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think we've always talked to each other long before either of us experienced therapy.
Yeah.
We do find it easy to talk. And I think maybe a lot of people, especially men, don't find it as easy to open up and be as honest with each other as we are. And I think that's really quite a special thing.
Yeah.
And as you were saying just then, I think a lot of people have that problem of feeling a lack of authenticity when they're speaking. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head about men. And, again, I'm only going to say that because I'm coming from that sort of perspective, because I think, in modern day life now, I think for a lot of men, there's just a very kind of confusing sort of idea of kind of what a man is. And I think there is a lot to be kind of to be confused by. I mean, you've got a lot of, we being in our early 40s, mid 40s, we're kind of still, being brought up in a very kind of classic men are a particular role and, that sort of thing. And as we've grown older and, go through young adult times, it's become very kind of complex, I think is the thing, and, having a family and things like that now, is as much as, again, it's very positive towards men being with their kids and doing all the nappies and doing all the, all the feeds and all the things. There's still this kind of very complicated, I think, understanding of for what the mainstream men are. I think there's huge extremes. I think there's lots of kind of people being like either alpha male or being kind of like, kind of in a situation where they very kind of in touch with the kind of, sort of, I suppose what's classically known as, I suppose, as female, kind of attributes to the way they are. And I think it's hard, I think, for a lot of men who just don't know how to kind of become one or the other, is that, the guys in the middle, which is probably quite a lot of people. It's very hard. I think it's very hard to sort of, to either be, the person who kind of feels like they can just kind of, come home after work and the family, runs to a door, the dad come home type of thing. And, it can be very difficult to then sort of just hang up that kind of, that mantle of kind of being the kind of the breadwinner type, as the very simplistic type of role as a man these days. I think it becomes very difficult for, especially people that kind of not so necessarily sure about themselves generally. And I think that's the other thing, is a lot of people don't actually, voice their worries. They kind of, especially I think a lot of men kind of push that kind of feeling down and suppress their worries or their anxiety, and what commonly ends up happening is that manifests in either being perceived to being grumpy and bad, just kind of generally kind of like, I mean, emotionally, I think, it's quite evident that I've not really still grown up. I still think I'm probably in major conflicts with things like my wife and, my dad, for example. I still go back to being like an 8-year-old boy, I think. There's this kind of, this gap of kind of being able to sort of actually feel like a grown-up when you actually have conflict with those that you really care about. And I think that a lot of it comes down to just being, just not being in touch with your feelings.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, you just kind of effectively, you let something build up, or you kind of ignore something for long enough to the point when you actually react to something, it becomes about something else, or so I think this is again part of this whole experience of being heard as and being, having what you're saying being valued, and it's kind of, I suppose it's a very kind of, again, it's sort of it's something that I suppose we put on ourselves, because to be vulnerable to someone takes the courage to kind of to accept that if it's not reciprocated, that you've got to then deal with that. And the usual thing to do is to just not have that situation. So you might not want to actually have that conversation with someone, or you might worry about how they might react to those sort of conversations. So you either overthink those conversations to try and actually determine what that person's going to say before they even say it. And that's how I find it, is that I've had conversations with myself, especially with, I don't know, if I had a problem at work or something like that, where I would spend maybe all night or, all day consumed by the thought of what that conversation was going to be like. Because it was almost like I had to kind of work out what they were going to say, how it was going to play out, so I could limit the damage to me in a kind of will they dislike me for it? How will I come out of this sort of, in this situation? And, this is it. It becomes a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of kind of not wanting to even enter into that kind of situation.
Right. And you kind of can do that thing that they do in movies sometimes where somebody's like in front of a mirror rehearsing what they're going to say to someone, and they say it again and again and again, and then of course it all comes out wrong, and it's often a comedy moment, isn't it? But I think people do that in real life more than they let on. And I used to do that an awful lot, and lately I feel like I've sort of the last couple of years of myself felt a lot more comfortable in my skin, and just knowing that I do vary according to my mood and circumstances, and there are different aspects to my personality, but that all of them are me. It's what's it? I don't know if you've seen that speech that Robert Downey Jr. gives, and it's an award to Mel Gibson. And it's quite funny because Robert Downey Jr. is basically saying how when he was at his lowest point, this guy really helped him when nobody else would, Mel Gibson. And he said, what you got to do is accept the darker parts of yourself. And he calls it hugging the cactus. And then he goes, and there's just one condition that he was going to do that I had to reciprocate, which was that just make sure that you look after the next guy. And then the punchline is, little did I know the next guy would be him. And he kind of brings him onto the stage. Obviously he's been in the wilderness for all these years to the crazy things he said. Yeah. But that stuck with me, that hugging the cactus. And I'm much more able now to go, do you know what? There's a lot of things about me that are darker than I'd like. There's things that maybe I wouldn't be so proud of, but they are me. I'm just that's I just have to accept that. And I've managed to be myself a lot more in work scenarios, and work just used to be a constant headache in that respect. Just really quite traumatic day to day. I mean, I was in a job for many years, like managerial jobs, which were probably not suitable to my personality, which quite high pressure, conflict, telling people bad news all the time. And that doesn't put you in a good place anyway. And I was like a square peg in a round hole. But in addition to that, compounding that was that I felt with work, I always had to, sort of exude a certain persona, like a mask. And many of us do that. Of course, we do that in life. There is you do adapt your personality to different situations, and that's quite normal. But I think when you do it to an extreme where you don't feel like you can leak out any of your actual self, it's very stressful, and it comes across as weird, actually. I think people sense the anxiety that's with you because it's just so unnatural. And I think when I see others doing that now, I think I just really feel for people in that situation, because I know what that's like. And that's a horrible situation to be in, where you're feeling like you're having to almost hide yourself.
And that's it. This is the thing, is that personally, this is how I've always sort of, not dealt is the right word, but, it's always kind of managed my feelings in that way, is that most of the time I've always tried to kind of be the sort of the person that people liked, I craved sort of being liked. And I mean, I'm not fully kind of over that, but I mean, I'm aware of that now. And so there are examples where I go into certain schools and stuff that I work at, and there'll be certain people that I kind of, because of their position, I just kind of like act in a different way, like a subservient kind of way. And it's because I kind of feel like they're in a position of authority, and it's been that thing of being drilled into me over like, you know, you give respect to people who are, you know, either, you know, successful or, you know, they've got, you know, that kind of, you know, position that, you know, you should be sort of saying, well, you know, and it becomes this kind of horrible thing because I can hear myself doing it, but I can't stop myself. I turn into that kind of like, you know, the kind of what we used to say about, you know, that kind of like, you know, just
when I met Ronnie O'Sullivan, you mean, and I was really nervous, and I tried to give him a beer and went, Ronnie, that bit, yeah.
But that's it.
If you're listening, Ronnie, the office still open. You can have a beer anytime you like.
Unopened or not. But that's the thing is that it's like that whole thing of I keep hearing there's a speaker who try to help people kind of find their sort of their authenticity and motivational speaker type thing. And he said, you know, and it's something that I've had in therapy where they said, like, someone comes over and goes, you know, hey, blue hair. And you're like, what? And he's like, you know, I don't like your blue hair. And you're like, well, I haven't got blue hair. And he said, you know, that's the kind of reaction that we should really be having about sort of most conversations. Is like, if someone's being unreasonable, you should, you know, to be in a place where you're like, well, that's just not true of me, you know, or, you know, if someone's accusing you of being something or telling you something or saying that, you know, trying to kind of convince you that you're something that you don't believe.
Yeah. Almost gaslighting you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's a hard thing, because if you're in denial and these things are true about you, then it's tough if you're the person who's kind of like, you know, sitting there going, I'm not these things. And you might, that's the thing is like, it's being the person, being aware enough of, as you saying, your darker sides or your inabilities to kind of, you know, control your anger in times or something like that, you know, and just kind of knowing those things about you so you don't get triggered, makes you much more of a kind of a truer version of yourself. Because, like, I know, you know, I can be an arsehole at times, and I can say things because I might say things because it just doesn't resonate to me that's at the time offensive. And in the past, I probably would have said things to kind of get a rise, or like I said to you off mic, where, you know, I might have said things because, like, I just felt like I needed to say something. Just to contribute something. And many times I'd be sitting, you know, in our kind of company, like, say, for example, in a big group, and I'd be sat there thinking, I've got nothing to contribute. Nothing interesting. I'm just not interesting. I've got nothing. I really have got nothing to kind of give to these friends of mine or these people that I'm with. So I'd say something to kind of like, you know, it's like that whole trap of like, you going anywhere nice? You know, it's like the kind of the taxi talk, you know, the kind of just that sort of small talk. Everything becomes small talk until something sort of, you know, gets from that. And I mean, I used to be so good at just kind of just being able to be comfortable and just saying, so what do you do? You know, that, you know, the small talk where it's actually meaningful, rather than panicking and going like, you know, was the weather nice? You know, and it's that I've for so long I've been stuck in that kind of, that person kind of, like I say in films where you say something and in the side you're like, no, don't say that. Or, you know, I say something and go, I really wanted to say that. And it is that frustrating part, because then you maybe don't listen properly, which I'm very, very good at, not listening at the moment, or have been for many years, because for so long, it's been about what's going on in here. It's going in my head constantly.
Yeah, and I can, again, completely relate. And I think there's a few things that just occurred to me as you're saying that. First thing is that I can completely relate to when you say you're in a crowd of people are talking, and you feel like I've got nothing. And something that's for a slightly different purpose, but like I've had some like quality improvement training at work and stuff, and that's kind of what I do nowadays. And there is something about, literally they say, when you're with a group of people and you're trying to get stuff out of them, there is an element where you just have to literally sit on your hands sometimes. And it's just like a reminder to yourself not to speak. Like, I am not going to say a word here. And there's something about sitting on your hands that makes you just wait. And there's a speaker called Brené Brown, again, I hear a lot about in quality improvement, but she's like, stay curious a little bit longer, you know, and actually just lean into the silence sometimes can be very powerful, because people like to talk, you know, and sometimes when you jump into, because you're nervous and you're trying to fill the silence, it kind of breaks their train of thought. But actually, if you just listen a little bit longer, something will happen. But that does take some practice to be comfortable doing that. But that's for a slightly different reason. That's when you have got something to say and you're trying not to say it, rather than what you're saying is you're more like filling a silence. But yeah, that's one of the things I thought as you were saying it. But I think also that thing where you're saying and you're feeling uncomfortable and uneasy, and even as you're saying it, you're like, I didn't know, why did I say that? I think there is an element of, the more tense and nervous you get about these things, the harder it is to be natural, and the harder it is to stay focused in the moment. And so you go into kind of panic mode. It's like you know, the headlight, right in the headlights, and so I feel like, and again, I'm not perfect, but what's helped me with that is I did that Headspace app for a while.
Oh yeah.
And I was quite religious about it for several months. It was when I was coming back from really bad mental health. And that was all about like just being very conscious and mindful of relaxing each part of your body, you know, very kind of almost monotonous, you know, your eyebrows, your nose, your mouth. And it made me realize that when I'm tense physically, it affects my mental state. And so when I find myself like in that situation where I'm like, just catching myself and being conscious of it, and then going, and then just consciously relax on my face and everything, and just change my posture and relax and go, and it's almost like I'm catching myself. And then once I'm like, it's a bit like, and a therapist told me this as well, it's like sometimes these uncomfortable emotions, you're like trying to push them away. And the more you push them away, the closer they get to you. But in a way, what you got to do is to, again, it's like the embracing the cactus thing. You got to go, this uncomfortableness is like familiar. It's like an old friend. And it's like, even if it's like not a nice feeling, it's like, oh, you kind of go, oh, hello, old friend, you're here again. Yeah. You're like, yeah, this is anxiety. This is what it feels like physically.
And that is very true. And I think this is what I'm going to try and find what this guy's called, because he was saying the same thing, is that it's only when you are okay with being uncomfortable do you actually start changing in that way, and healing the kind of the trauma as such. Because he said it's like you should almost put yourself into positions where you get embarrassed, because he said that is more about putting yourself in the position of having to deal with it, and dealing with the kind of the more times you kind of like, well, it's okay, I've come out and I've got a hole in my shirt, and it's like, okay, it's not like, oh, I've got, hole. And it's those sort of things of being able to kind of scale it to the point where, someone is shouting at you, and you within yourself that, okay, if you've done something wrong, then, it's okay to not just be like, oh, well, I can just front this out. But at the same time, it's understanding where the boundary is and putting those boundaries in to every situation, and saying, actually, this isn't a reasonable way of communicating, regardless of, what the situation is. There's still some sort of, line where you just turn around and can say, well, this is not going to continue this way.
Do you know what? The interesting thing about that is that when you call people out that you don't necessarily know, but it's very different when it's, say, like a spouse or somebody that you're really close to. But let's say it's in a work situation. I've been in situations before where somebody more senior than me has been saying something that I just don't think is at all fair. And I've called them out on it. And it's amazing how people can back down. Like, you know what I mean? When you have that sense of righteousness, like, no, this is not an appropriate way to speak.
Yeah.
Not on. That gives you a real strength to other people. And actually it does. I remember specifically, like, years ago in my career, I did that at one point and I thought, oh shit, what did I just say? But actually, people commented and said, yeah, you came across really well in that meeting. And I was like, whoa, really? Because it didn't feel comfortable at all.
Yeah.
But actually, people respected the fact that you called them out.
Yeah. And that's it, because it shows others the way that they probably are feeling as well and can't actually manifest it within themselves. I mean, you know, I'm not someone who wants to be like a hero, but it does really annoy the out of me when I'm in a situation where, like, just take for example, like, people just being antisocial and just being, like, I've got kids and things with me maybe, and they're swearing or something like that, and it's this kind of society where it's just like, don't do something because they might stab you. It's always this kind of like this fear of the consequence. And I'm not sort of advocating that we should all be like have a go heroes, but I think there is a big part of society, and I'm one of them, where I don't feel comfortable or capable of just saying to someone, look, you're being, socially wrong at this point. Just because you out doing whatever, you have to be aware of people around you. You can't just kind of, walking around windmilling and thinking, accidentally I hit someone, that's their fault for, and it's the same if you're using words and actions that in society are not really acceptable. It's like, again, my dad always said, like, time and a place. And there are times and a place for, being silly and doing all things, that you want to do with your friends. But it does annoy. I find it very annoying that I'm this person that's like, I really just want to tell them just not to just be dickheads. Mm-hmm. And that should be reasonable. It should be reasonable to say, guys, can you stop doing that? And, it is just one of those moments where it's like, I'm just like so annoyed, like sort of being sort of cowardly about things. And it's like, and it is just purely like, just the inability to kind of just find the right word to say, guys, can you not do that?
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I can totally relate to that. So I think if I know I'm in a civilized situation and people like at work or something like that, or I'm amongst people, family and things, and somebody says something unreasonable, I'll have the confidence to generally speak my mind. But in that situation where you're dealing with characters you don't know in a public space and things are very unpredictable, I'm the same. I don't really tend to do it. I think when I was younger I did, but you think when you have kids, your perspective changes, and you're like, you do hear about these horrible incidents where it's like that guy was stabbed on a train, I want to say. It was just a father and son, maybe they were out to a sporting event. The guy didn't have a dad by the end of the day. Yeah. It's that sort of thing. And I mean, I was literally on a train. We just had this really nice day in London, me and my wife, Jax, who's obviously a good friend of yours as well. Yeah. And we were on the way back on a late train. And this is a typical situation. I think the train is particularly bad for this because it's a long journey. And if they're on along that, you don't know when they're going to get off necessarily, and they're a dickhead or whatever. it's like, you really don't know what to do. And if they've had a few drinks or whatever, and there was this guy, and he was just being really drunk, and there was a couple of people ahead of us. I think it was just the seat, like, one on from me. And I was trying to pretend to be asleep to just get out. Felt like such a coward. And I think Jack had headphones on us, but we completely were both conscious of this.
Yeah.
And there was, just these two guys, and I think they were in football shirts, but they weren't the problem. It was this other guy that came along and was like, basically slating all the players that had ever played for Chelsea Football Club, saying John Terry was shit, he didn't do anything for England, and all this, just being really loud and aggressive, and just the big I am, and I'm just going to stand here, and you know, when they're just, you've got a sense that they're going to start, they're building an audience, and they want to bring other people into their, they're courting, they're holding court, and it's like, oh God. And the thing is, I knew him. He was this dickhead from school from years. I hadn't seen in like 20 years. And I'm not going to repeat his name, although I should do, just to call him out, because he's a dickhead. But I just completely ignored it and wussed out and did not say a word. And none of us did. But then when he moved on to the next carriage and he finished holding court, the whole people around us were like saying, what kind of a twat was he? Yeah. They were just, everyone felt the same way, but no one would say anything. And these poor lads in front of us were just kind of trying to humour him and go, yeah, my hero is really shit, isn't he? Yeah, it's just... and funny enough, I dug out a school photo, going through a box of photos from my dad's recently. And he was even in my form, in sixth form. I was like, God, I can't even remember that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is as well, is that, it would have been one of those moments, just, again, like a film moment where you just, all of a sudden, as a coincidence, waking from your slumber to, like, pretend slumber, to, like, fire, like, some sort of, like, and yes, you were the dickhead of year 6 or whatever it is, and everyone like completely destroy him.
I know, if only there was a really embarrassing incident at school, I could have just called him out on.
Yeah, exactly.
But I couldn't think of one. I would have definitely have done that. I'm just going to shut the bloody dog up a second. Hang on.
But those moments are, I think, again, very common for people, because I don't think as a society we back each other up in that way. We don't group together in the kind of the spirit of the kind of, the societal norm. We seem to always just be like, allow outrageousness and just kind of then absorb it and allow people to be like egregious and just kind of moan about it after the fact. And, I think that's just kind of the way that we've just kind of cultivated this. I think it is very insular because of the way we've grown up as adults. I think, very much kind of independent and all that sort of thing of the big family kind of experience that our previous generations have had, the kind of I moved away from the kind of small village type thing. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand being someone else's son, and it was just just all that kind of never me. It was always that kind of, and again, it's always the kind of all about me. But it was just, I never had an identity other than the legacy of being someone else's son, and it, moving away from that was so liberating. But at the same time, it came with the fact that I was effectively on my own. Which again, it wasn't that again, poor me, I'm on my own. But I think a lot of people go through that, is that it really, you're down to like these the nuclear family type things where, again, you become little families with your friends, but you just stick together and you don't have that, you have each other's back, but at the same time, you don't have that wider community kind of investment. And I think people used to be more invested in things and hence kind of, more about, proud about their kind of, maybe their neighborhood. And I mean, take for example now, I mean, I live in an area where it's very nice and very kind of neighbourly, but at the same time, people, their instinct isn't to be neighbourly. It's more to be about kind of like watching what other neighbours are doing and being kind of, you know, NIMBY kind of almost in some ways, and, you know, cordial. But, you know, I think most people are very much kind of like just trying to be aware of what their neighbours are doing. I mean, my direct neighbours, for the most part, are nice. One's very nice, but again, we still don't like have around and things like, even though the intention is there, and it's just, but we just have our own lives.
Yeah.
And even though we live next to each other, we don't kind of like, we're not like mates, we're not friends, you know, we're friends enough to know, like, you know, if something went wrong with the house and she wasn't there, and, you know, I got her number. But I think that is very common of a lot of people, is that they, you know, they're very insular to their kind of their home or whatever it is. They're not necessarily outwardly invested in what goes on around them. Is that kind of story about, I think on a comedian was saying, it could be Billy Connolly, where, you know, you hear the alarms go off and you're like, oh, I hope they're fucking dead, because they, you know, because it's like, you know, that alarm's keeping me awake. And it's like, you know, like where I'm from, people would have been like out on the street, like, what's going on, you know? And the sort of the situation when you went to my mum and dad's and, you know, you set the alarm off, or your brother did, and that's it, you know, there's a different kind of it's just kind of lost. And I think it is lost in the kind of self-preservation, insular mentality. And it does, again, it bears that kind of the same fruit of kind of like being, you know, just self-preservation.
I think it taps into the fact that you're absolutely right, that human beings are social creatures. And so because of urbanisation over the years, as you say, small rural towns still have potentially some of that mentality. If it's people that have grown up in that community, very much so. Maybe not so much in like the Cotswolds, where it's basically just rich people buying property, but, you know, in genuine rural communities. But of course, urbanisation, the sort of the fragmentation, the church is less of a thing. People are less religious. That used to bring communities together. Yeah. It still does for the people that go to them. And I think that's why I can see the value. I'm not a Christian myself, but I can see why people really get a good sense of goodness out of communal type activity like churches. Now, what just struck me as we're having this conversation was that it's only getting more that way. It's only getting more fragmented because of things like home working. Yeah. And now really you could do, you know, it's like a lot of people who are
online. You pretty much don't have to go out. You know,
exactly. It's all that. And like people from London, say, are now coming to Sheffield because actually, for anybody who's not listening, Sheffield's probably a lot nicer than you think it is. It's not all like the full Monty, and it's on the edge of the Peak District, and they can get really good value for money. And the fact is, if they can work at home in London, why not work at home somewhere where they're going to get a lot better house price? Yeah. And so people are more and more disconnected from, because where they work might have no resemblance to the community where they live. But I think that's why things like the Queen's death, and years ago, of course, Diana's death, you have this, what I feel is really weird, is this sort of public outpouring of grief and all this. And I find it very hard because I tend to be someone who's always naturally suspicious of herd mentality. I don't tend to go with the herd, and I think you're the same as well. In fact, if anything, I always tend to just naturally bulk against it. And so I find it difficult to relate to. But I suppose when you think about it, people don't have a communal outlet anymore. And so when they have an opportunity to be communally feel the same way about something, like somebody's passing, like someone famous. I think that's why people go so crazy, because they're so starved of it. Normally, people just, they're so fragmented in their own little bubble.
I think you're right. I think it absolutely does manifest in the kind of like, there's a cause. So there will be those who will put, in real life will probably be quite reserved when it comes to things like being online or, talking about things, on your Facebooks and things like that. They can be very, very forthright because there is that lack of, consequence to having that kind of opinion or that media. And I think that there is more people like that. And in a way, again, it's probably, a sort of counterbalance to feeling, as you say, feeling that they can't say something. So actually, when they're in a position where they can sort of maybe do it more freely or with less threat of repercussion, they're quite full on about it. And maybe probably in things they possibly don't necessarily feel hugely strongly about, but become stronger because it becomes if you gave them the same, remit to go and say it in the street, they'd probably be very hard pushed to actually say it. And those who do have that kind of, stand up and, want to talk about something they believe in, it's great if, as long as people then are accepting that they can be challenged and they can have their mind changed. And that's the dangerous thing about I find about a lot of younger people you see on these, TikToks or whatever, videos and people. And, it does seem very much like they're pulled in to something that they kind of maybe do, think, morally or, is wrong, but they don't actually understand or look into it in such a way of fully understanding their topic or the thing that they're outraged about. It's like people get outraged about a 60-second video and then that's it. That's their cause, and it becomes this sort of, oh, well, what do you think about so-and-so? And then, if you try and challenge that mentality, it becomes a kind of either you're silencing them or you're bigoted in some way or something. It's
100%, and that's why it's becoming more and more like, because it's binary, isn't it? And that's what all these social media algorithms thrive off, is that clash, that taking one side or the other. Because ultimately, the more comments there are, or the more, even if it's a dislike rather than a thumbs up, that is, they're going, oh, the algorithm's going, people are commenting on this, let's push it out more. And so people lean into the drama more because they know, as a YouTuber, they will, or whatever it is, they'll get more views or more an audience if they lean into the drama. And that's what's happening. And you're just getting these more and more diverse things. People just cannot seem to find the ability to take the middle ground. There's no, the ability to debate is just gone. It's like, you're either one thing or the other. People can't see the grey areas in the way that they perhaps used to be able to a bit more.
It's like the new religion, though. It's like the new stance that people who are devout Christians or something, who have, full on, belief that what they've read or whatever they've been taught in those sort of doctrines, that is the truth. And, it becomes like, if you can't challenge and grow, from being challenged, that's the worst type of person, because, it's the kind of insistence of being, right in the face of evidence is the most dangerous thing. Because if someone can sort of say, the sky is green, and you can kind of show them that it's not, it's like before they would be the people that would be like, the weirdo or something, you kind of accept them for being them, but they've got this kind of vehicle to go and speak, to the masses of people who probably wouldn't ever be, exposed to them in the past. You'd have, in the past, when we were young, it would be those magazines of like, giant fish ate my wife or something, and it'd be it's just nonsense, just to kind of, just to grab a headline or to pull you into like some sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, conspiracy theories is just rife now.
Yeah.
Because people have a platform, and it's quite scary really how really basic science is just being challenged and not accepted.
Which is common sense as well. I mean, it's the inability to question your own thought, and whether it comes back to this whole thing about not being authentic and feeling you have to either be controversial or part of something, because then that you are seen to be part of something true or something worth being part of. But you don't actually know truly what you're being part of. You're being part of an ideal. Let's stop war in whatever country at the time is, and it's that kind of moment of like, yes, I'm gonna, and I've done it. I'm sure I've definitely done it, and been like, I've heard something on something like, oh yeah, so and so's, doing this, and like your wife would be like, you're just talking shit, and I'm like, yeah, I am, but it's kind of, I just thought I'd say something for the sake of just kind of getting a rise, because I maybe know it would piss someone off, or just because just throw a grenade into the room and see where it goes. I think that is, I think it is the crux of a lot of the reason why people do it is because they either don't have the ability to say and actually get across what it is they feel, because they can't truly feel it, for either feeling the kind of, I suppose, the sort of past hurts of saying something and it being exposed, and of course then you can't, then it hurts to have that kind of that emotion, that conversation. So you guard yourself, or you're in a situation where you've had maybe an upbringing where you've been maybe quite controlled, and it sounds very hard to say, but that was kind of like how I was brought up, in the fact that I was expected to kind of act a certain way, and in sort of in the right way, I suppose, to be sort of respectful and be kind of, the sort of, for the right reasons. But I think there's this kind of almost this sort of too much emphasis on being kind of a good boy for the sort of the sacrifice of kind of actually being able to sort of have a voice and just act like a young person, and it was kind of like, I suppose I was trying to expect it to be a bit more grown up than I was at that age,
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think it goes through to the education system as well, because I think it was Rockefeller or one of these very rich Americans in the early 20th century, but they poured a lot of money into the education system in the States, and they were quoted as saying something like, we don't want an education of thinkers, we want an education of workers. And so the education system, certainly in the States, was very much geared to command and control, and making people be compliant. And that's very, very handy for governments and things, if people just go along with stuff. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is an element of that. I'm very conscious of time. I think we've spoken for a fair while, and it's been really, really good. We're about 50 minutes, and I wonder whether maybe we kind of call it a day for our first episode.
Well, actually, that brings me into something, because I was going to ask you, How do you deal with time? How good are you with time?
That's a good question. I think I'm better than I used to be, but could still be an awfully lot better.
I have this weird feeling that I can manipulate time.
Really?
In a kind of like, I have this kind of like when I'm doing things, I have this sense that I've got the ability to do lots more in the amount of time I've actually got. So I do feel like it's somehow, I've got this sense, false sense.
But this sense. False sense. So you're not Bill Nye from About Time then?
Not at all.
Right, okay.
It's more that kind of extreme hope, I suppose, in that actually I've got the ability to do all the things that I'm trying to do within the small amount of time I've got.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it means that often I'm either rushing to do things at the last minute, doing things thinking I've got more time than I have. So I find that getting a bit more kind of consumed by doing things and then realizing I've not got enough time to do them. Trying to feel obligated to, or not trying, but feeling obligated to finish something and thinking I still can get somewhere maybe in the time that I want to. I'll take, for example, like tonight, and it was like I was doing a work thing, and I was in a position where I just had to get something finished, and I needed to be home so that my wife Kirsty could kind of go out to do a dance club thing. And it got to the point where I kind of like, I knew it was going to be tight. So I sort of texted to say, look, I might need to meet you at the place. But then my concept of time at that point was fractured, because when I actually got a phone call saying, you're still where you are, why, you're not going to be there in time, are you? I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I can leave in 2 minutes, knowing that actually I couldn't get everything done I wanted in 2 minutes, but I still had this kind of belief that actually, to myself, false belief, that time would allow me to get what I needed doing done and get to where I wanted to be.
Yes.
Because I felt, bad for the fact that I knew I couldn't get everything done, but actually it's this kind of stupid kind of denial of, time itself. And yeah. I think I do have problem with time in the fact that I do have moments where I'm just like, it's like, 2 hours could have gone past, and I'm just kind of, I'm not like completely like I wake up the next second and it's like, oh, it's 2 hours, but I can be so hyper focused doing things, or, just kind of completely zoned out to time. And then there'll be times where I'm just kind of like so focused on time, and that tends to be, I suppose, when I'm late, and I'm late quite a lot. I think I think most people would know that of me. I'm usually late about.
I don't think of you as a late person, but then I don't. We're good friends, but we're obviously got busy lives, so I don't see as much of you as I used to when we're like in our 20s. So maybe my opinion would change if I spent more time with you.
Yeah. Well, I was late tonight. So they were.
Yes, you were, but very slightly late. Yeah. You could have been a lot more late than that.
But that's the thing. That's that's where for me is sometimes the hardest thing, because it's like trying to bend that 10 minutes to my will, so I'm not late. I keep trying, and that's the weird thing, because it's like, I know this about time. Time is
fleeting,
hard taskmaster. It can't be beaten into submission, but I still keep trying. And, one day I might succeed, but actually it's something that I think for me that it's just difficult to try and accept that I haven't got the ability to succeed at being able to do the things.
Bend time to your will.
To make it happen, that actually I leave time I have to leave, do everything I need to do, and be where I need to be at the time of my choosing, regardless of what happens in between. And, you know, it's that kind of, I think, for me, just more kind of acceptance and a realization that my relationship with time is very, very, very one-sided and not in my favour.
Yes.
It is one of those sort of things, attributes of me that I have unfortunately come to accept as something that I'd struggle with, but also, like I said to you before, there's always that glimmer of hope that somehow I manage to be late, knowingly late, and still get to where I need to on time.
Yeah. Knowingly late, but on time. My perception of time is slightly different, because I think the two things about time for me is, as I get older, I realise how precious time is and how much I waste of time. You know, like, I would be so much closer to my goals if only I didn't just play Tetris in front of the telly for hours on end. You know, like, I like to think I'm a busy person. I've got 2 kids, I've got a job, I've got my YouTube channel, I've got this and I've got that. But the amount of time I waste is criminal, really, when I think of it, of just doing not really very much at all.
Yeah.
Or just kind of like, I'm really trying to get into more like really hone my editing skills, and there's so much to, you know, improve and learn. It's like an infinite amount on editing that I could learn. But then even with that, I get distracted by a particularly little cool thing, and I'm just like, yeah. I'm just going to like spend hours frame by frame doing this like rotoscoping green screen because it's cool, when actually I could just be in that same time have achieved so much more. And it's like it's time is getting more and more precious the older we get, and it's just so that was the one thing. And then the other thing is just I think we better leave it there because time is up.
Time is up.
Yes. So I think, John, yes. I feel like we have reached the conclusion of our first ever podcast together.
Yes.
I mean, we could have probably spent a whole hour talking about this topic alone, but do you have any ideas about the name of the overall podcast?
I don't know really. Again, it's. I don't know whether it feels like a Gary or, you know what I mean. It's just kind of like, you know what I mean. You just have a feel of like about a name for something. You know, it just doesn't. I don't know if it's got a. I don't want it to be like too pretentious and flashy, but I think, you know, I mean, I think maybe something we can maybe it's something we could just actually talk about off mic, and you know, I think it would just be a bit more kind of, like the guy said, try not to overthink it, but yeah. I think maybe more just kind of like just rip a few things and, you know, just kind of see where we get to.
Adam and Tom discuss the universe.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you know, we can riff on that, and you know, I think we obviously each podcast can have a little different name, can't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, it's, as you say, this is just something to try. We've tried, and you know, I'm hoping that, you know, even maybe from listening back to it, we might be able to, you know, eventually kind of get a bit more kind of idea of how this and what this could be. And I think that's the idea. Just leave it up in the air for now. And they say maybe it could just be called Gary. I don't know. Just something, you know. No, but you know, it could be just something as abstract as that. But no, I think it's been wonderful, kind of having a situation where we have just had the ability just to talk, you know, ourselves, and it's mainly, you know, just random stuff and I think that's the point, is that the more we have these opportunities, the more sense hopefully it'll make. And, I think there's been a lot of it that we've spoken tonight that's, there will be stuff that I will listen back and think, yeah, that is very true, because sometimes just being able, like I said to my therapist, sometimes just having the ability to kind of, the words come out in a way where it's not judged, not particularly kind of find its form, and it finds its form as you are discussing it.
Yeah.
Helps you have the ability to actually kind of make them more solid. And just because they're internal and they're not necessarily untrue, but actually being able to discuss them out loud, I think gives you the ability to actually analyze and or just give them some, I had a dream and it became solid, that moment of just kind of like actually just making it go out there, and by saying the words of what it is you're feeling, it helps you to either find if they're true, or think of, whether they're actually something you actually are thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to writing stuff down, like in a diary. And I find I've kept a mood diary now as like an app called Dailyo, which I recommend.
Yeah.
And I've done that now for about 3 or 4 years. And that's wonderful. There's something about getting the thought out of your head and solidifying it that does. It's very therapeutic. Yeah, it's tangible. You can read it or you can listen back to it. And actually, I don't really look back on my entries that much, actually. It's only really when I want to say, oh, when did that happen? Or when did I last see them? That I'll do a search, which is quite a good function of it. But just knowing that I have got it out and made it solid is actually a really good one. So,
and this is my my sort of diary in that way, in a way, because I find it very, very difficult to write things down. I get to the point where I'm like, pen and paper, and it's like, okay, make it work, And I think that's the thing. That media to me, or that form of expression, doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And this is it. I try to keep like, planning, what they called it. What was it? I was trying to got into one time. It was just trying to like, it was a way of organizing yourself, and it would be like, you put little kind of titles and things, and it'd be like, do this, and then you give them kind of time quantities and sort of values and all this sort of thing. And it was Rimmer making his own,
exam timetable. Revision timetable. He never actually does any revision. He just spends the whole time doing the timetable, yeah.
So you spend so much time doing that I just go, oh, fuck it. So,
let's end this, John. Because the bloody dog's barking.